The diner smelled like old coffee and sizzling bacon when the little girl finally whispered the words that froze the entire world around her. The morning sun poured through the windows, touching only half of her trembling face as she sat across from the heavily tattooed biker who had found her wandering alone near the gas station. Her voice was barely more than a breath, soaked in fear and something even heavier, something no child should ever carry. And when she said, "Sir, my stepfather came into my room last night," the silence in the diner grew so thick it felt like the world itself stopped breathing. If you believe children deserve protection, kindness, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. It truly helps these stories reach more people. The biker's name was Logan Brooks, a longtime member of the Hells Angels chapter that operated on the edge of their quiet desert town. Most people saw only the beard, the tattoos, the leather cut, the loud motorcycle. They never saw the man who once lost a little sister to the kind of danger this trembling girl was trying to describe. They didn't know the ghosts he carried. But the girl, Emily Carter, just 7 years old, didn't know any of that. All she saw was the only adult who had stopped when she ran barefoot and crying into the cold dawn. Emily sat stiff and small in the red diner booth, her pink shirt smudged with dirt, her hair tangled from the night before. A single pancake steamed on the plate in front of her, untouched. A glass of milk stood beside it, barely sipped. She stared at her hands curled on the table like she was afraid even they might betray her. Logan leaned forward slowly, hands clasped together, forcing his breath to remain steady as he watched the little girl try to gather the courage to speak. He noticed the bruise half hidden beneath her sleeve. The way she kept glancing toward the door like someone might burst through it. The way her shoulders jerked at every passing car outside. His jaw clenched, tattoos shifting as the muscles along his arms tightened with a storm he struggled to contain. Emily didn't go into detail, children often don't, and shouldn't have to. But she didn't need to. The few broken words she managed to release painted enough of the picture for Logan to understand the terror she had lived through. She spoke of footsteps outside her door every night. Of the way the house creaked with dread. Of the way her mother had stopped smiling months ago. Of fear that grew bigger than she was. And last night, something happened that sent her running into the darkness without shoes. Logan felt a fire ignite inside him, the same fire that once drove him to protect his sister when they were young, before life tore their paths apart. He pushed aside his plate, stood slowly, and signaled to the diner owner, a gentle nod, the kind that said he needed help without explaining anything. The owner, who had known Logan for years, simply nodded back and moved toward the back room to make a call. Logan didn't yell. He didn't storm out the door with rage. Instead, he slid into the booth beside Emily and wrapped her gently in his leather vest to shield her shaking body from the world. She leaned into him, not because she knew him, but because she needed someone safe. For one small moment, she found refuge in a stranger who understood pain far too well. When the other Hells Angels members arrived, Reed, Mason, Cole, Vega, and the rest, they filled the diner with their imposing presence. Leather. Steel. Boots thudding against tile. Engines rumbling outside like thunder waiting to strike. But not a single one of them lifted their voice or moved too quickly. Every biker knelt beside the booth and introduced themselves softly, speaking to Emily with gentle faces that the world rarely got to see. They listened. They promised she wasn't alone. And then they did what they always did for their own, they protected her. Logan carried Emily out to his bike, bundled safely in a heavy jacket 3 sizes too big for her. He strapped her in front of him, one arm always around her, while the entire biker convoy rolled out behind them, engines roaring like a warning to anyone who dared harm her ever again. Emily looked back as the long line of motorcycles stretched across the road, following her like guardians made of thunder. The house she had fled from stood silent at the end of a dusty road, its windows dark, its yard unkempt. Emily clung to Logan's vest as they approached, her tiny hands gripping the patches like lifelines. The bikers didn't storm the house recklessly. They followed the law, calling the authorities, ensuring the officers arrived before anything escalated. But while they waited, They formed a protective circle around the little girl and Logan, engines rumbling low and steady, creating a wall between her and the life she feared. When the stepfather finally emerged onto the porch, bleary-eyed and irritated, he froze at the sight of dozens of Hell's Angels lined up across his yard like an unbreakable wall of fury. He didn't get the chance to say much before police stepped in, questioning him, escorting him away as the truth began to unravel. Emily watched from the safety of Logan's arms, her eyes wide but steady this time. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't scared. Emily's mother, Grace, arrived shortly after, rushing toward her daughter with tears streaming down her face. She hadn't known what her little girl had been going through. She had been trapped in her own storm of fear and manipulation. Seeing Emily in Logan's arms, protected by men the town often misunderstood, broke something inside her, but it also mended something else. She hugged her daughter fiercely, promising change, promising safety, promising a new beginning. The Hell's Angels didn't leave that day until they were certain both Emily and Grace were in safe hands, surrounded by social workers, counselors, and officers who took the situation seriously. Logan stayed the longest, watching Emily finally eat a warm meal, this time finishing every bite. He stood near the window, silent, until Emily ran up to him and wrapped her tiny arms around his waist. He knelt, returning her hug gently, knowing he might never see her again but hoping she would never forget that someone stood up for her when she needed it most. Weeks passed. Emily and her mother moved to a new home, far from the shadows of that night. Healing was slow, and some days were harder than others, but the darkness that once clung to the corners of Emily's life no longer controlled it. And every so often, on quiet afternoons, the deep rumble of motorcycle engines could be heard passing by their new street, not stopping, not interfering, just watching over her from a distance. Guardians made of leather and steel, always there, always ready. Logan never told anyone how deeply Emily's story affected him, how her bravery reopened old wounds and old memories of the sister he once tried to save. But helping Emily gave him something he thought he had lost forever, a sense of purpose bigger than himself. A belief that even broken men with scars and bad reputations could be protectors. Could be heroes. That he didn't need thanks. He didn't need recognition. He just needed to know that Emily was safe, that she could sleep without fear, that she would grow up knowing not all strangers are dangerous, and not all angels have wings. Some ride motorcycles. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps keep these powerful, emotional stories alive. Please comment below, would you have helped Emily if she came to you that morning? And so, life moved forward. Emily healed. Grace grew stronger. The Hell's Angels rode on. And Logan Brooks, the man who once felt lost in his own darkness, found a piece of light again, because a little girl trusted him with her truth, and he chose to become the kind of man she needed most. Sometimes heroes don't look the way we expect, sometimes they look like a biker in a diner, listening to a frightened little girl who simply needed someone to believe her.